Hey Art Wizards, Hajra here. Please like, comment, follow, give a footnote credit for my original info and research, and check out my description box or website for all my important links, including new classes. I've always relished painting shadows first, or even solo, as a painted chiaroscuro value study done with paint versus graphite or charcoal. One of my older and most popular videos got around 500,000 views for comparing watercolor versus gouache and discussing the old master's technique of Grisaille value underpainting. In other videos, as well as in classes, I've compared Grisaille with tiling and mid-tone methods of painting, along with doing further videos where I compared and contrasted watercolor with gouache and demoed Grisaille uses and types. So I wanted to revisit Grisaille, which means the gray in French, and its variations for my students and viewers in a new Motherlode video. You may know I love to repeat that art is like life. If you get your values right, everything else is easy. See my other videos, especially the watercolor and gouache techniques and blending videos, for full explanations on how to do wet and wet, wet on dry, and gradient blend techniques in watercolor. In this video, I'm going to be focusing on the value underpainting information. Your final color layers and subject and desired mood will all inform your value underpainting choice. Here I'm showing the 3 official hue categories, as well as some I came up with or expanded, and also some that I've seen other artists do. So I'm starting with a basic gray Grisaille, which can be done with a black or gray, and I've labeled all my different underpaintings and will demo them via quick Art Deco roses to focus on their variations and benefits versus a complex painting subject. But there's plenty of challenging and info-dense painting demos among my 250 videos, including my Grisaille and tiling playlist for you to check out because I can't cover everything in any one video. I expanded the Grisaille category myself by adding shadow violets and blue to it, because if they're dark enough, like indigo or sodalite or moon glow, they'll just read as warmer or cooler, more saturated grays under other colors. Thus, adding dark blues and dark violets to the lineup like I've done adds more color mood punch as well. Grays are seen as the most neutral of shadow colors and can be used for just about any subject, and usually have more value punch than other shadow colors that are more hue biased. Alex Ross doesn't call it Grisaille, but he's a master of it in basic black gouache for the majority of his comic book art. One of his inspirations is Norman Rockwell, who also used Grisaille value underpainting to lock in the accurate rendering he wanted after tracing projected photo references. Then there's Brunaille, or brown underpainting. Brunaille underpaintings work well for skin regions, as well as affecting outdoor light better than the colder grays if used for an entire painting. In another YouTube video, old archival footage of Dean Cornwell painting is dubbed initially a wash-in raw umber that becomes a tonal skeleton, and that's just a Brunaille done in raw umber. I also expanded on this to include reds, yellows, and oranges, which will read as warmer or cooler and more saturated, lighter browns. So here I've demoed an orange underpainting along with the sepia one. Verdi or green underpainting is actually also another historically popular choice for skin areas, because green is a complement of red, and so it'll have maximum contrast with the reddish hues in skin. The green I chose here is a very low chroma, low saturation green called racing green, so it's actually quite dark. You can use lighter and brighter greens as desired though. In fact, the next rose is done in a brighter phthalo-type green for an underpainting category I just invented, as it's pretty intuitive, using complementary pairs where one color is a value underpainting. You can see that a Verdi would be great shading under a red floral, and vice versa, where the red becomes a more saturated Brunaille under a leaf. The same can be done with blue and orange or yellow and violet as the other 2 complementary pairs for suitable subjects. The next simple rose demo is a warm and cool yellow combo as a more complex and vibrant Brunaille. It's great for adding temperature pop along with the value punch in the underpainting stage. This is essentially what Susan Harrison Testain does for her beautiful botanical flowers in watercolor. And FYI, I've read dozens of botanical books because they often employ value underpaintings and beautiful glazing techniques, and Testain's book is the best instruction and the most stunning flora that I found in 2 decades in that genre if you're interested. So this next one is a custom shadow mix I saw Sandrine Moggy do in her botanical illustration book, using the 3 primary colors red, yellow, and blue. It can be warmed or cooled down via different proportions of the 3 colors. Moggy's the only published artist I found among dozens who actually labeled this as Grisaille 2 decades ago, while everyone else was just using it informally, unlabeled, as a tonal map or shadows first or something similar. So I thank her for taking the trouble to define it so I could just actually look it up as a historical technique in encyclopedias and old art technique books. Likewise, this custom grisaille can also be mixed via secondary colors, which will be less saturated to start with once it's mixed as an average versus a primary shadow mix. And of course, you can also make a custom grisaille shadow mix from any other limited triad combination of colors as well. So before I get to the color passes over top of all of these value underpainting variations, I'll share a selection of some of my monochromatic Grisaille, Verdaille, or Bornai paintings, then more studies and original pieces with additional colored glazes over top. So you can perhaps study the depth that the various value underpaintings add to all of these pieces. In fact, if you want to see the process for these original artworks or master studies, most of them are available as free info-dense YouTube videos on my channel. Before I posted on Grisaille myself on YouTube almost a decade back, it was pretty sparse on here, and the only oil painting video that showed an excerpt of this method didn't have any real explanation or show the different variations or possibilities. I found encyclopedia info, and then I started to get mesmerized by the possibilities that it offered. And it was also discussed as a cheaper historical method of mimicking a relief sculpture border or sculptural relief vignette outside a building versus paying more for an actual 3D relief carving. I did the first local color passes on the final rows with no underpainting. And at first, it looks perfectly passable for the simple deco floral that it is. But eventually it's going to look really sort of raw in comparison to the fuller bodied and richer and more ambient roses that utilize grisaille or its variations. Also, the raw rose and raw leaf with no value underpainting are less harmonious with each other than any other rose and leaf pair on this paper, because they're not unified with a common color note because they don't share any colors in common with each other. And Grisaille will do that seamlessly for you if you're having trouble with that too. Now I'm going to use the same red and green and glaze them as sheer colors over top the rest of the roses and leaves that have some type of value underpainting. You're going to see a whole lot of diverse color mood and value punch and richer depth that the underpaintings are going to provide. So watch and see how all of these develop as I talk a bit more about other artists that use Grisaille and stuff. You're going to see some Gothic mood roses with subtle temperature variations and the Grisaille and Verdaille options, and you'll also see the unique contrasting color pops with the complementary value pair, and then you're going to see the warmer shadows and the mellower vibe of the Bornai develop, and also the warm-cool combo yellow Bornai that makes it so perfect for painting watercolor botanicals that seem to magically glow with the illusion of trapped sunlight. Doing a value underpainting helped isolate values and edges without adding hue and chroma to the mix, which is not just easier for beginners, but also for the success and simplification and accurate rendering of complex and advanced pieces as well. It will really save you from a lot of frustration and breaking a paintbrush over your head. There's so many advanced artists doing value underpaintings for all or some of their pieces, even if they don't formally label it Grisaille, Bornai, or Verdaille. But it is everywhere. This list includes Moggy, who did label it, as well as Alex Ross, Adam Hughes, Susan Harrison Testain, Scott Gustafson, Donato Giancola, Thomas Blackshear, Drew Struzan, Jeff Miracola, Dan DeSantos, Dean Cornwell, Norman Rockwell, and so many more, all using their own mediums of choice, including using even sealed graphite or charcoal or Conte crayon drawings, standing in for a harder to control paint underpainting. Sure, you can do this addition of shadows later on top of colors, and it may work better that way for certain limited color schemes or hues that can get muddy, but doing all your chiaroscuro first helps accurately lock in your darkest darks, really develops your form, and also pushes value contrast, as it's easy to fall prey to an insipid, weaker value range when you don't do this first. And it also saves you from ending up with a confusing overabundance of values in your piece. After all, the human eye can see approximately 500 values and like 10 million colors. So though you may not get to 500 shades of gray, or even 50, you may still end up with too many for a pleasing, clear visual story in your piece. For rendering clarity and focus, you want to keep it at 3 to 10 values max. Even with my simple deco roses, the gradient blending automatically increases the value range. So that's a really useful observation, that traditional painting mediums will yield 5 to 10 values after you make blends in between them if you start by rendering 3 to 5 clear ones. And thanks to my physics and history backgrounds in college and grad school, I can share that Ibn Sal's law, also called the Snell-Descartes law, illustrates how glazable, translucent mediums like watercolor or ink or oil, as I explained in another video, are affected by the law of refraction and the wonderful science of optics to operate like sheer stained glass panels stacked atop each other that allows for that luminous depth achieved via glazes and layers, including Grisaille or one of its variations like done with these roses. And even when I don't use Grisaille in pieces painted opaquely, like when I'm doing tile paint shapes and that jigsaw way of painting, all that value recognition practice is indeed invaluable in identifying dark, mid-tone, and light shapes. So that's a lot more exciting stuff for you all to add to your mental art info storage units. So bust in there and get busy. As always, wizards, thanks for parking your brushes here and wishing you all epic art adventures.